This is one of Cluny the Scourge's Rome Total War online battle videos. This time I'm playing as the Scipii. I've taken 2 units of Mamillo gladiators, 2 units of war dogs, 6 units of Auxilia, gold upgraded, and 6 units of Roman archers deployed on loose formation, interspersed with my infantry. An unusual sort of army, you might think. Well, we're playing on the Pripyat Marshes, which is a map with a great deal of woodland. Auxilia gain a combat bonus when fighting in woods, so I've decided to choose an army which is based upon the opportunity to take advantage of that. My opponent, Pompey, playing as the Julii, has taken an army composed of 4 units of Praetorian cohorts, 4 units of Roman archers, and 5 units of Praetorian cavalry, though 2 of them began the battle hidden in the woodland. At the outset of the battle, most of my army was hidden. Only my general unit, which you can't hide, was visible to my opponent. So, he decided to begin the battle by sending 1 unit of his cavalry, rushing forward into the woods to see what I had. They came under heavy missile fire, so all of my Roman archers were exposed to view, and he took heavy casualties. He also managed to see my gladiators and 1 unit of Auxilia. They became distraught at the numbers they were faced with, a single unit alone, and routed very quickly. This unit of cavalry was effectively destroyed. The bulk of my forces, however, here, 5 units of Auxilia and 2 units of war dogs, remained invisible to my opponent. For all he knew, I had legionaries or cavalry hidden in the woods. He realized that I wasn't going to come out to him, he would have to come in to me. The battle therefore took place where I wished it to, where my Auxilia would gain a combat bonus from fighting in the woods, where his cavalry would suffer a combat penalty from fighting in the woods, and also would be facing units who were spearmen designed to fight against cavalry. My general unit, by the way, was one of my Mamillo gladiators. I therefore decided to name him Maximus. It was a toss-up between that and Spartacus. My opponent's name was Pompey, and Pompey did steal some of the credit for defeating Spartacus, but in fact it was Crassus that did the real work. So, he closed within missile range, and we began an archery duel. We were both using Roman archers, because they're cheaper than archer auxilia, though they have shorter range. We were both receiving a cover bonus from being within woodland, and we were both deployed on loose formation. However, I had half as many archers again as he, therefore it was certain that I would win the archery duel. He therefore had to attack me, which was just the way I wanted it, since that way the true strength and nature of my infantry would remain unknown to him until he had closed with me. My plan was then to envelop each of his smaller number of infantry units, supported by archers, and to release my war dogs to add their fear effect to wear down the enemy morale. The battle quickly broke up into 3 engagements, the left, centre and the right, and it was in the centre that I deployed my dogs. My enemy charged his Praetorian cohorts in, having deployed them in long thin lines, rather than in much more appropriate thicker fighting blocks, and his pressing need to push my skirmishing archers back and to discover where my hidden units were meant that he had little opportunity to use his pillar. He made another early blunder by allowing 2 of his Praetorian cohorts to rush past the centre in a futile pursuit of skirmishing archers. On the right of the battlefield, as soon as his troops approached, I swung wide with some of my spearmen, and thus managed to achieve an envelopment of one of his Praetorian cohorts, as you see here. He tried to counter the envelopment with his cavalry, but where on the open plains charges with Praetorian cavalry might rout light infantry like Auxilia quite swiftly, here in the woods it isn't so simple. On an individual level, each Praetorian infantryman and cavalryman has a much heavier striking power than the opponents they face. This, however, is the moment for bitter and resentful mere Auxilia, the adjuncts of the army, to get their own back on the Praetorian knobs who strut around thinking they're better than the rest of the army. We are going to see light infantry and gladiators defeat the elite. That has a nice ring to it. Defeat the elite. It rhymes. Here is where the most heated action took place. What is needed is for one of us to achieve victory here in the centre or on the left, and then transfer reinforcements. Speaking of the left, we haven't seen that area yet. We have gladiators and Auxilia facing Praetorians here. The flank of the enemy infantry is also exposed to my archers nearby, who are firing at point-blank range in support. With their help, my gladiators, their spirits long worn down by being used as amusing playthings by Roman society, are burying their woe in the blood-drenched soil of battle. Here we have continuing action over on that right-hand pocket, and as you can see, even though the enemy cavalry is all massed and concentrated against me, I've already routed his infantry here, and he's badly missing the support of those cohorts he sent on their goose chase far into the rear. His general unit is taking heavy casualties there, and this is the moment when, having achieved victory in the centre, I'm able to rush my forces there to support the right. There were still 2 or 3 fighting to the death Praetorians there, as you can see, but they were so irrelevant that I decided to leave them to my dogs to take care of. My opponent reacted by pulling his general out of harm's way and attempting a series of withdrawal and recharges with his cavalry, and by the shock effect of such a charge did actually manage to rout one of my units, as you can see here. However, whenever a cavalry unit charges into spearmen, they suffer immediate casualties, and they get what's coming to them, i.e. the tip of a good Roman spear. Naturally, once he realized his mistake, my opponent tried to rush those units who'd been chasing my archers back to join the main battle. This is what happened to them. My dogs, freed from the action in the centre, rushed back and held them up, unsentimentally devouring the flesh of their human masters. The Julii may be the family of Caesar, but it's Caesar Milan they need here. My opponent continues his pattern of behaviour on the right with his cavalry, but for every unit he routs he takes ever more casualties. His general, though, seems to be leading a charmed life. I will venture to say that this was a mistake. What my opponent should have done at this point was to transfer his cavalry, whose mobility, after all, is one of their main advantages, away from the right to support his infantry, who were still engaged on the left in hammer and anvil action against my gladiators there. At this point, that unit which had been snagged by the dogs and so delayed, having managed to shake themselves loose, finally arrived on the right, far too late, and I achieved a nifty envelopment, as you saw there. Over on the left again, let's see my gladiators doing their work, and you'll notice that there's something wrong about the way my opponent's infantry are fighting. Half of the unit is simply hanging out over on the side here, not attempting to fight me. So what's gone wrong? What's happened is that my opponent has, unwisely, left this unit on the hold ground mode. Never do this when you're sending troops into melee combat. As you can see, my gladiators are able to gradually chew that unit up. As you remember, my opponent actually sent 2 units chasing after those archers in the rear. This is what happened to the second one. It too was snagged on the dogs after the first one had shaken itself loose. Then it set itself off on another goose chase after the archers, was enveloped by missile troops, who rained fire down on it from the rear until it gradually thinned out and routed. Back over on the right, you can see me finishing off that unit which had arrived late, drip-fed into the meat grinder, while at about the same time much the same is happening to that unit on the far left. My gladiators, looking proudly badassed in their ornate battle armour, take their final vengeance upon the Roman enslavers. Killing is their business, and business is good. All that remains is to defeat the surviving enemy archers. I have no cavalry to hunt them down with, but I do still have plenty of bowmen, so while I use them to rain fire down upon some of the enemy targets, I use my infantry to chase after the others, thus forcing them to skirmish backwards and so be unable to maintain continual fire. My enemy does make a last-ditch charge with his general, which is the kind of defiance we can all admire, but maddeningly, after the unit does actually rout, the man himself survives and escapes off the battlefield. And my gladiators had so wanted to take his head and use it as a football. What were my opponent's mistakes? He should have spent less on elite cavalry on a woodland map. He shouldn't have left that one unit on stand ground mode. He should have deployed his units in thicker blocks rather than thin lines. He should have done more to keep them together instead of allowing me to divide him and defeat him in detail. He should have given them a chance to use all of their pillar. A full CWB rules complement of 6 Roman archers might have helped also. And he shouldn't have chased after my archers.